Tonight, the ACT Greens lock in the last seat in Brindabella as they prepare for coalition talks with Labor. Yuma, good evening. I'm Adrienne Francis, coming to you from Ngunnawal country, and we also acknowledge others with connections to the lands of the ACT. This is ABC News. Also tonight, Australia's AUKUS partners join military exercises in Jervis Bay. A koala spotted in North Canberra, the first sighting of the endangered species here in 3 years. And a former president and a rock star show their support for Kamala Harris as the US election campaign enters its final days. The final makeup of the 11th ACT Legislative Assembly is now known after the last seat in Brindabella was called for the Greens. A narrow win for incumbent Laura Nuttall means the Greens now have 4 seats, placing them in a better position to negotiate with Labor on forming a possible coalition. Here's James Viver.
Election night was a little muted for the Greens.
It was a bit of a sombre night on Saturday.
But almost one long political week later, their numbers and their vibes are much improved.
4 more years, let's go.
Greens lost political territory to a brace of independents who will now sit on the crossbench. 4 seats in the new Assembly will be Green, 2 less than the last term, but 2 more than they'd secured on Saturday.
We've seen a swing of 1% against the Greens, which is much less than was predicted on election night.
As with the last Assembly, Labor and the Greens will need to work together to make the political sausage, but whether the Greens will sit in Cabinet, ministries or on the crossbench is still being decided.
No options are off the table at this point.
Labor finished with 10 seats, and Andrew Barr is realistic about what's next.
What I will endeavour to do is to have some form of understanding, particularly around supply and confidence, so that we can ensure stability of government in the next 4 years.
The Greens surveyed its members this week on the non-negotiables to take into talks with Labor.
This is an advisory process. At the end of the day, the parliamentarians have to take responsibility for the final decision.
The party's greener outlook is thanks in no small part to the re-election of Laura Nuttall. The 24-year-old showing age is no barrier with her narrow win in Brindabella.
Young people are here to stay in politics, and absolutely we should have a seat at the decision makers table.
On Friday, Ms Nuttall's lead over James Daniels was a few hundred votes, leaving the Liberals with 9 seats. The result means Mick Gentleman failed to be re-elected after 10 years in the ministry and 16 in the Assembly overall. An election producing another Labor win, but a new-look government. James Viver, ABC News, Canberra.
King Charles has issued a dire warning on climate change while opening a meeting of Commonwealth leaders in Samoa. The monarch says warming temperatures and seas pose an existential threat to the globe, urging leaders to move quickly to slash emissions. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts is in Apia for the meeting.
A celebration fit for a king. The monarch and fellow Commonwealth leaders together in Samoa, united also in message about the rapidly intensifying climate threat.
Lives, livelihoods and human rights are at risk across the Commonwealth.
It is the greatest threat to the survival and security of our Pacific people.
Charles has been a long-time climate advocate, now on the throne, only slightly less forceful.
I can only offer every encouragement for action with unequivocal determination to arrest rising temperatures by cutting emissions.
And as the leaders gather, another reminder of the stakes. The United Nations warning there's a risk of a catastrophic 3 degrees of global warming by the end of this century, unless more is done to slash emissions. Australia's not immune. Its climate record has come under fire from the Pacific. But the PM says leaders understand Australia's trying to strike a balance.
They recognise that the challenge of climate change doesn't mean that you can just flick a switch and act immediately. We need to make sure that energy security is prioritised.
While future threats are dominating this CHOGM, the Commonwealth's past is also casting a shadow over the meeting, with some Caribbean and African leaders still pressing for slavery reparations. The UK's ruled that out, but Commonwealth leaders look set to endorse a final statement which acknowledges the controversy and calls for a, quote, conversation about the best way forward.
I understand from listening to people across the Commonwealth how the most painful aspects of our past continue to resonate.
The very fact that the concerns that have arisen means that there must be conversations to be had.
A discussion unlikely to die away. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Apia.
Qantas has vowed to continue its efforts to resurrect its tarnished brand and win back customer trust. While the airline's share price has soared to record highs, shareholders and passengers still have questions over how the airline is run. And as the company's annual general meeting was held today, union members stopped work seeking better pay.
A broken down baggage system meant chaos for passengers at Adelaide Airport.
Baggage system is currently offline. Worried about going through security at the moment because the lineup is huge.
You don't know if we're going to miss our flight or anything.
And there's been strike action by Qantas engineers across the country at peak travel times.
No more delays! Strike for fair pay!
It's all been happening against the backdrop of the airline's annual general meeting in Hobart.
There is no pretending that last year was anything other than a very difficult year for Qantas.
Selling tickets for cancelled flights and the illegal sacking of 1,700 workers during the pandemic has hurt the airline's brand and will cost it hundreds of millions of dollars.
I can assure you that the issues that caused the difficulties and reputational damage last year have been and are being comprehensively addressed.
While the airline is determined to move on, some shareholders are keen to look back.
As I look around here, I feel the ghost of Alan Joyce in the room.
Disquiet from some shareholders about financial incentives for executives failed to lead to a spill of the entire board.
We do feel that Qantas listened to us and our concerns.
As for customers and the airline's pledge to do better,
I think they're probably on track.
I think it's got a fair way to go, really.
I fly a lot. I think they've been pretty incredible.
In a bid to restore its reputation, the airline is offering more frequent flyer seats and is upgrading its fleet. But its announcement of a $1,000 bonus for employees is unlikely to appease all workers.
Bonuses are a one-off. They don't pay the bills. They don't really lift your head above water in the cost of living crisis, which we are in the middle of.
We are looking forward for solutions that deliver improvement in pay, in conditions for our people, while ensuring that we can continue to invest.
An airline navigating a path out of troubled times. Fiona Blackwood, ABC News.
Australia's AUKUS partners have spent the past few weeks on the south coast, taking part in military exercises. Advanced technology for undersea warfare is being tested in waters around Jervis Bay. Military and industry representatives have been testing out cutting-edge drones while sharing real-time data.
Off one of the most picturesque military bases in Australia, AUKUS partners experiment with cutting-edge maritime technology.
We're working together to create a more capable, more collaborative joint force of the future.
For weeks, 3 militaries working alongside industry have conducted a series of experiments and exercises with drones to improve undersea warfare techniques.
That allows Australia, the US and the UK to trial and test our autonomous systems in a real-world environment.
Among the homegrown innovations being examined, a large uncrewed underwater vehicle known as Speartooth.
We're trying to understand the edges of the technology and take it to failure so we can improve it and continue to evolve that technology.
These exercises are also the first time the AUKUS partners will be testing the transfer of tactical control, which will allow any of the 3 countries to take control of autonomous vessels anywhere in the world.
Virtually as soon as the AUKUS partnership was born, other nations expressed interest in collaborating in so-called Pillar 2 projects, including regional ally Japan. The ABC has revealed Japanese officials were invited as official observers for this year's event, and planning is underway for the country to participate next time. Tim Fernandez, ABC News, Jervis Bay.
An elderly couple has been killed in their bedroom by a truck that crashed into their home in southwest Victoria. The truck left the highway, ploughing 200 metres through a field before crashing into the brick house.
A quiet morning in southwest Victoria shattered by a violent crash with fatal consequences. At 7 a.m, a tip truck heading from Port Fairy to Warrnambool veered off the highway near Tower Hill, careened through a paddock and smashed into the corner of this house, killing the home's owners in their bedroom.
And the damage and the result and the tragic loss of life that comes with having a collision with a heavy vehicle.
The married couple, 81-year-old Jim Madden and his 80-year-old wife Carmel Madden, were well known in the area.
It's a small town, everyone will be feeling it. They have a lot of relations here.
Local publican and family friend Peter Archibald says he'd known Jim Madden all of his life.
Jim had his 80th birthday here. His wife had her birthday here. They were here last Friday night for dinner.
The 70-year-old truck driver has minor injuries and was taken to Warrnambool Hospital, where he's helping police with their investigation.
Whether it's a mechanical fault with the truck, whether there's a medical episode involved, whether it's inattention, whether there's a phone use involved, all of those things will have to be looked at in the next few days.
Skid marks stretching long and straight through a paddock for about 200 metres show the path of the truck after it left the highway in a 100km/h zone.
I can't say that they haven't washed off any speed during that 200 metres, but clearly they haven't washed off what you would expect to be all of the speed.
In the meantime, the community is grieving the loss.
It'll be a big hole to fill, a huge hole to fill.
Jean Bell, ABC News, Tower Hill.
Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe says she was assaulted earlier this year at a public event, leaving her with spinal injuries and nerve damage. In a statement, the senator said she had to have surgery and a plate inserted, which has left a scar on the front of her neck. She made the statement in response to media questions about why she was absent on a number of parliamentary sitting days this year. She says Victoria Police are investigating the assault. A wild koala has been spotted in Canberra for the first time in 3 years. The species is listed as endangered in the ACT, and there's no known koala population within the territory's borders. But this latest sighting in Jacka is prompting celebration and concern. Emmy Groves explains.
ACT Government conservation officers have confirmed the sighting of a male koala in grassy woodland in Canberra's far north. In 2022, the status of the species was escalated from vulnerable to endangered under federal environment laws. And until now, a koala hadn't been seen in the wild here since 2021, when it was spotted in Tennant and Oaks Creek. There's an unofficial report of a koala in 2017 near Pialago, but before that, you have to go back to 1992 and a sighting in the Cowan Escarpment Nature Reserve. A koala was seen just over the border near Sutton last year, and bellows have been recorded since 2022 in Googong and southern ACT. A federal partnership is helping to track the species locally and implement a national recovery plan, and koala conservation is part of the ACT's updated Native Species Conservation Plan released in December. Even so, this koala is coming under increased scrutiny.
If this koala has been there for a long time, if it's part of a larger group of koalas, they do disperse, but it's quite unlikely that this is a dispersal event because they're relatively rare. It's much more likely that we're finding an animal living in the actual habitat that it's in.
Its exact whereabouts in Jacka are suppressed for the animal's protection, but we know it's close to this residential development. The groundwork for the area hasn't started yet, but 700 homes are planned.
We have to find better ways to build housing that doesn't consistently come at the expense of nature.
The Federal Environment Department says it hasn't received a referral, while an ACT government spokesperson says work's underway to progress environmental due diligence and survey activities. Those activities will include monitoring to determine if it's an individual koala from a New South Wales population or whether the local habitat is being used more frequently. Next steps will be based on those findings.
Emmy Groves reporting. Australia's Indigenous tourism sector offers visitors a unique window into one of the world's oldest living cultures. Despite a surge in demand for these experiences, industry leaders say the sector is being overlooked, costing the economy millions of dollars in untapped potential.
From the lush landscapes of far north Queensland, the Mundraby family is making waves in the tourism industry. Their Indigenous-owned and run tour company combines storytelling, environmental education and cultural experiences.
The foundation of this is around providing employment that'll create change through opportunity.
Visitors embark on a scenic boat ride from Cairns, learning about the surrounding environment from an Indigenous guide during the short trip across the bay. On the other side, they're whisked away to a bush block for a traditional welcome and take a guided walk on traditional country. Today's contingent of North American tourists are impressed.
I learned a lot. I learned about soap, I learned about natural stuff.
The company now employs 22 people and welcomes more than 5,000 guests each year. But the journey has not been without its challenges.
When we first started off, the conversation we had with industry and potential partners is, sounds like a wonderful vision, guys. Good luck with that.
A parliamentary inquiry has recommended sweeping changes, including the establishment of a First Nations tourism body to capitalise on the growing demand for Indigenous tourism. The new body would be separate from the existing taxpayer-funded Tourism Australia and would be modelled on the Western Australia Indigenous Tourism Operators Council, or WATOC.
Developing the Aboriginal tourism sector so it's ready for the international market.
The federal government says it's considering the report's findings. Christy Sexton-McGrath, ABC News.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says there are hopes ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas could begin again in the coming days. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza are continuing, with an attack on a school sheltering displaced Palestinians, killing at least 17 people and wounding dozens more.
A race to save the wounded. The Israeli military bombed this school in the Nuseirat refugee camp, saying it housed a Hamas command centre. The hospital that received the casualties says the vast majority of the dead are children.
By God, not a single man, all children and women, and all of them in pieces.
In Gaza's north, at the centre of Israel's offensive, impossible conditions are getting even worse. One of the last remaining hospitals is now said to lack even basic supplies.
If nothing is done to respond to this situation within the next few hours, there will be a humanitarian catastrophe. Kamal Adwan Hospital will turn into a mass grave.
The situation is a byproduct of Israel's push into the Jabalia refugee camp. The UN says that operation has displaced 63,000 Palestinians.
United States and Israeli negotiators will meet in Doha in the coming days in a bid to restart ceasefire talks. The US Secretary of State is urging Hamas to return to the negotiating table. Antony Blinken might be hopeful of progress in Gaza, but ending Israel's fight with Hezbollah militants in Lebanon could be more complicated.
More strikes on Beirut. Israel's campaign against Iran-backed Hezbollah has now killed 2,500 people and displaced 1 million in Lebanon. And direct involvement from Iran itself remains a risk.
I hope Iran is getting the message very clearly from, not just from us, but from other countries, directly or indirectly, that any further attacks it engages on toward Israel really risk fundamentally its interests.
The US still talking about containing a conflict that's spread further and gone for much longer than it wanted. Eric Twarchek, ABC News.
24 people are confirmed dead after Tropical Storm Trami hit the Philippines. The storm made landfall on the northeast coast of Luzon, the country's most populous island, dumping a month's worth of rain in 24 hours. Widespread flooding and landslides have forced residents to the second floors of their homes. About 150,000 people are sheltering in evacuation centres. A former president and a rock star were just the warm-up acts for the Democratic presidential candidate on the campaign trail. Kamala Harris was courting voters in the swing state of Georgia just 12 days out from the election. Her opponent, Donald Trump, was also targeting battleground states, with polls still suggesting it's a very tight race. North America correspondent Barbara Miller is in Atlanta, Georgia.
A former president introduces a potential future occupant of the White House.
Good evening, Georgia!
On a balmy Atlanta evening, Kamala Harris making her pitch to voters in the key swing state.
It's either Donald Trump in there stewing over his enemies list, or me working for you, checking off my to-do list.
Crowds here hoping the first female vice president of colour could be about to break another glass ceiling.
History in the making. To see someone with similar color skin like me and a woman.
Our democracy is at stake.
She's actually restored my faith in politics.
And if a former president wasn't enough, how about inviting a rock star along?
I'm Bruce Springsteen, and I am here today to support Kamala Harris and Tim Walz for president and vice president of the United States.
Donald Trump, meanwhile, hitting Arizona and Nevada, another two key battlegrounds, campaigning on the issue of illegal immigration.
Immediately upon taking the oath of office, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
The former president also outlining more plans for any second term, vowing to sack Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, who brought 2 criminal cases against him.
It's so easy. I would fire him within 2 seconds.
Well over 2 million people in Georgia have already cast their ballot. Early voting records are tumbling, and there's a dwindling number of people who haven't yet made up their minds. But the campaigns are pulling out all the stops.
And when we fight, we win!
As the 2024 race hits the home straight. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Atlanta, Georgia.
A US judge is set to reconsider the life sentences of the Menendez brothers after a Netflix documentary raised the profile of their campaign. The case has been back in the spotlight 35 years after the pair was convicted of killing their parents in their Beverly Hills mansion.
It was a high-profile Hollywood double murder that captured the world's attention. 21-year-old Lyle and 19-year-old Eric Menendez were convicted of brutally shooting their own parents. They were locked up for life with no chance of parole for the 1989 crime, but now there's a possibility they could walk free.
We're going to recommend to the court that the life without the possibility of parole be removed.
The brothers' story has been back in the headlines recently with the release of a popular documentary.
Everyone asks why we killed our parents. Maybe now people can understand the truth.
There was also a fictionalised series that focused on the allegations of serious abuse inflicted by the boys' parents.
And we decided we weren't going to take that anymore.
At the time, a court suggested these claims were made up and the brothers' motive was gaining access to their parents' fortunes.
And I do believe that the brothers were subjected to a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation.
Relatives have come together to campaign for the pair's release.
Their continued incarceration serves no rehabilitative purpose. It's time to recognize the injustice they've suffered and allow them the second chance they deserve.
Celebrities and internet stars have also advocated for the brothers.
They never got a fair second trial.
A Los Angeles judge will make a final determination on the brothers' future on a date yet to be set. Isabella Higgins, ABC News.
The British former nurse and convicted child serial killer Lucy Letby has been denied an appeal against her conviction for the attempted murder of a newborn baby. The 34-year-old has been convicted of murdering 7 children and attempting to murder 7 more. Her lawyers sought an appeal against a further conviction for the attempted murder of an 8th child. They argued the jury was prejudiced by the media coverage of her original claim, a claim the judges disputed. Letby, who is Britain's worst serial child killer of modern times, is serving 15 life sentences. To finance now, and billions of dollars have been wiped off the value of 2 major companies this week after their billionaire founders were embroiled in scandals. Here's David Chow.
Today's best performing stock was WiseTech Global. As you can see, investors cheered after Richard White, the scandal-plagued billionaire, decided to step down as CEO. And even with the 13% jump in its share price, the software firm is only back to where it was a few days ago. It's still down 20% since the start of the month, which is when the financial press started reporting on Mr. White's numerous affairs with women and allegations that he engaged in bullying and intimidation. And that led to $3 billion being wiped off his personal fortune, as most of it is tied up in WiseTech shares. Now, looking forward, WiseTech says Mr. White will stay on as founder and founding CEO, which begs the question, how much power will the new CEO actually have? So while WiseTech bounced back and the share market went up slightly by 0.2%, today's worst performer was Mineral Resources, which is also embroiled in a scandal. Over the past week, this mining company has lost a quarter of its value, which coincides with media reports that its founder and CEO Chris Ellison had allegedly been evading tax for years, and this is currently being investigated by the corporate regulator ASIC. In case you're wondering, it's the same Chris Ellison who famously wanted to ban his workers from leaving the office to buy coffee. Now, looking overseas, share markets rose in most places except for Japan, which is voting for a new prime minister this weekend. In commodities, oil prices slipped while gold and iron ore had a decent jump, and the Aussie dollar has dropped to 66.2 US cents. And that's finance.
Cricket Australia has removed David Warner's lifetime leadership ban with immediate effect. The ban was put into place in 2018 as a result of the ball tampering scandal in South Africa. A 3-member independent panel has unanimously decided to overturn the decision. Warner has retired from international cricket, but this would allow him to captain the Sydney Thunder in the Big Bash League this season if elected.
This is far bigger than a cricket captaincy role. This is leadership in a lifelong context, so any administrative role, any captaincy or coaching role in cricket. So this was about him, his daughters in particular, the legacy he wants to leave for his family.
To the weather now, and your observations of Lake Burley Griffin with 2 very different views. From Western Park, Paul Flanagan shared scullers paddling against a golden sunrise. And from Black Mountain Tower, Roger Bean took in this bird's eye view of our city. Thanks for taking us with you. And the address for your photos, your observations, as always, is canberraweatherpics@abc.net.au. After a low of 1 degree north side and 2 in the valley, Canberra enjoyed a sunny and partly cloudy day with a top of 19 degrees. Around the capital, after lows of -3 for Thredbo and -2 in Perisher, through the day, Nowra, Moruya and Griffith reached 21 degrees. Across the nation, Broome reached a top of 40 today, and there were showers over Melbourne, Hobart and Darwin. The satellite shows cloud in an active trough over the tropics, causing isolated storms. Cloud over Victoria and Tasmania behind a cold front is bringing showers falling as snow in highland Tasmania. Patchy cloud associated with the surface trough is bringing showers and storms to southern Western Australia. Tomorrow, showers are forecast for Brisbane, cloudy for Hobart, sunshine for Sydney and Melbourne. The high country can expect lows of -5 tomorrow, and there is a sheep graziers warning for the South Coast, Central and Southern Tablelands, Southwest Slopes, Snowy Mountains and the ACT. Partly cloudy along the coast, 19 for the Bay, and there's a marine strong wind warning for the Illawarra, Batemans and Eden coasts. After a low of 1 degree with a chance of frost, Canberra can expect a mostly sunny day with 19 the top and light winds. The sun will rise at 6:03 a.m. and set at 7:33 p.m. Looking ahead, we can expect a mix of partly cloudy and sunny spring days with tops of 27 degrees on Monday and also on Wednesday. And that's ABC News for this Friday night. From me, Adrienne Francis, thanks for your company. Enjoy your evening. Yara, good night.